So I'm going to start now. Thank you all so much for being here. We're very excited to have this presentation for you all today, talking about leveraging the federal funding that's coming down for climate and clean energy, and how localities across Northern Virginia in particular are using that money or applying for that money to make our communities more healthy, safe, and resilient. So as we get started, I want to go ahead and introduce the two speakers that we've got with us at the moment. First is Supervisor James Walkinshaw from Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. And we also have Robert Lazaro, the Executive Director of the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. These two are two of many of the folks that have been working on the priority climate action plans and climate pollution reduction grants to try and bring that federal funding to Northern Virginia. So I appreciate both of you all being on. If you don't mind, to get us started, and Robert, we can start with you. Tell us what your organization is and what you all do and how you all have been involved in this process. And then Supervisor, we'll turn it over to you.
Sure, and thanks for having me today. I'm Bob Lazaro. I'm the Executive Director of the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, and simply we're a consortium of the 13 leading local governments in Northern Virginia, representing 2.5 million folks. While only 3% of the landmass of the Commonwealth, Northern Virginia generates 42% of the state's GDP. So we're quite powerful economically. We've been involved working with our colleagues at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments and our local government members as well, Fairfax County included, on working to inform what is in our climate pollution reduction grant application with the EPA, and we look forward to hopefully winning and implementing that in our region. We've been involved in community energy planning, energy issues for more than 20 years. So we're happy to be a part of it and hopefully be able to leverage these federal funds.
Okay, well, thank you, Jordan. Thank you to LCV for hosting this, inviting me to participate. It's great to be here with Bob. I am an NVRC commissioner and really proud of the incredible work that NVRC does to help facilitate so much of our efforts around climate and especially resilience in Northern Virginia. I'm James Walkinshaw. I represent the Braddock District on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, which is right in the middle of Fairfax County. If you look at the county on a map, I represent George Mason University, Northern Virginia Community College. I also chair our board's environmental committee and our board's legislative committee. So I'm responsible for helping to lead our really aggressive climate change and climate resilience efforts and plans in the county that have been in the works for many years, and we're now working on implementation, and I'm sure we're going to get into some of those issues here today. So thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much to both of you. So first, before we get started in sort of the nitty-gritty, I do want to go over sort of the big picture of what we're going to be talking about today. So some of you will have seen the title of our webinar is Funding the Future, Putting the Affordable Clean Energy Plan to Work for Northern Virginia. What do we mean when we say Affordable Clean Energy Plan? Taken together, the Inflation Reduction Act passed in 2022 and Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed in 2021 make up an affordable clean energy plan. And this plan and its subsequent funding creates a historic opportunity to shape our future by tackling climate change and pollution, rapidly expanding our clean economy, creating good jobs, and investing in frontline communities. The Affordable Clean Energy Plan investments in the Inflation Reduction Act will help bring the United States 80% of the way to reaching President Biden's 2030 climate commitments. Further policy actions like those taken by municipalities, businesses, and individuals will help take the country the rest of the way. As the largest clean energy investment in the United States, the Inflation Reduction Act will invest more than $369 billion across the country in solar and wind farms, manufacturing batteries, electric vehicles, and other clean energy components, reducing pollution and environmental justice communities, rebuilding clean industry in places losing fossil fuel jobs, and ensuring the clean energy transition lifts up communities most often left behind by these issues while creating millions of family supporting jobs. So taking all of that into account, Bob, can we start with you in talking about what are the climate pollution reduction grants and how does that parlay into the development of priority climate action plans?
I don't know how long we have for this webinar, but I would say, the Carbon Pollution Reduction Grant is a grant being offered by the EPA, which local governments, state governments, or consortiums of local governments like COG can apply for funding. Northern Virginia, along with the District of Columbia and suburban Maryland, submitted one application as through COG for this program. And I think it's nearly $100 million worth of grants if we did receive it. Our piece of it is to expand our Solarize Nova program to 5,000 kilowatts of new solar geared towards low-income families that have received weatherization or efficiency services. Some of our local governments, as I understand the application, are looking to improve their own facilities with these funds. Government buildings are a major user of electricity in the region, fossil fuels in the region. Some have applied for electric vehicles and other sorts of electric buses, et cetera, to reduce their carbon footprint. I'm optimistic about it. NVRC is one small piece of this grant. I would remind everybody that the region has set a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030 as compared to 2005 levels, 80% by 2050. We have a long way to go. The region, Northern Virginia, as on its own, we fell short of our 2020 goals. Fairfax County did meet their 2020 goals, so we have a way to go. A lot of the energy use in Northern Virginia is no surprise being driven by data centers. We have the highest concentration of data centers in the world, and so when you look at greenhouse gas numbers in Loudoun and Prince William County, they're considerably high. Others, and I know they're working as well to reduce them. So that's our small piece of this. We're excited about it, and we look forward to the opportunity to implement them.
Awesome. And Supervisor, can you talk a little bit about sort of the county level's involvement in this whole process and how you all approached it from your perspective?
Yeah, sure, Jordan. So, in Fairfax County, we went through a very extensive planning process to develop our three plans to tackle different aspects of the climate crisis. For the first and biggest, our CCAP plan, and I struggle with the acronym, Community-Wide Energy and Climate Action Plan, and we spent 18 months developing this plan from January 2020 to June of 2021 in collaboration with our community. And just, by way of background, in Fairfax County, about 5% of the emissions are county government and county operations. Significant, we are the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, right? Fairfax County government, but that means 95% are outside of our county government operations in the community, businesses and residents. So we really wanted to engage the community and engage businesses in the development of the plan in the hopes that they would then feel invested and have a stake in helping us meet the goals that the plan laid out. We also started by taking an inventory of our emissions and the programs that we already had in place. And we've been working on these issues in Fairfax County for more than 20 years, quite frankly, in terms of climate. Fairfax County was one of the first jurisdictions to join and help start an organization called Cool Counties, back in the early 2000s. So we've been working at it for a long time. And that group, the CCAP group, developed recommended actions from all those stakeholders. So we had our environmental groups and nonprofits at the table, businesses, civic leaders, civic groups, and residents, and developed the recommendations by sector. And the plan is hundreds of pages, but the key thing is, we decided to prioritize and focus on the sectors that contribute the most. Won't be news, I don't think, to anyone on this webinar: buildings, transportation, and our energy supply. So we developed that plan, and we are very rigorously tracking our progress toward meeting the metrics and goals that are laid out there, culminating in being a carbon neutral county by 2050, and we're working towards that. Second plan is more inwardly focused, that 5% of emissions that come from our county government operations, our operational energy strategy that the board actually adopted in 2018 and has been working on and improving since then. And just, one number, we just announced this week that effort, specifically weatherization and efficiency of county government buildings, right? And we have some old buildings in Fairfax County. We've saved $5 million. We're saving $5 million per year in energy costs by making those buildings more efficient while reducing our emissions. We're transitioning our entire county government fleet, and there's a lot of attention paid correctly to buses and bus fleets. But Fairfax County has 5,500 light and medium duty vehicles in our fleet, right? That's everything from, police patrol cars to code enforcement investigators and building inspectors that are driving around the county at all times. So part of that plan is electrifying that fleet. Third plan is our Resilient Fairfax plan, which has won a lot of national awards, and I really encourage folks to take a look at. It is really an amazing piece of work that lays out how we're going to help ensure that our county facilities and our community can adapt to the effects of climate change, which we all know: drought, extreme cold, extreme heat, and localized flooding. So we have a series of implementation strategies coming out of that as well that we're working on, and we track all of that. We have a climate action dashboard. If you go to fairfaxcounty.gov and search in the search bar climate action dashboard, you can track our progress on all those measures.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I have looked at the dashboard, and it's very thorough, talking about all of the different sort of measures that you all have put in place, as well as the timeline, which is something I want to talk about generally too. We're also joined by Jeff King, who is the director of I want to get this right, climate, energy, and air programs at the Washington Metropolitan Council of Governments. Jeff, do you mind telling us about the timeline of the submission that you all made and what the next steps are going to be, sort of at a top level scale?
Certainly. And just so you know, I'm joined today by Fitria, who's here with the State Department program with the International City and County Managers Association from Indonesia, as part of a very large contingent that is all throughout the United States with host communities learning about climate change. So thanks for having us. So Jeff King here with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. Yeah, we recently prepared the Priority Climate Action Plan for the region. And interestingly, it was beyond the borders of the normal COG region. It was for the entire metropolitan statistical area, for the metropolitan Washington area. So it includes some counties to our south, down into Fredericksburg, Stafford, Spotsylvania, as well as some of the counties to our west, Warren, Culpeper, etc., including Rappahannock County, actually. So thanks for having us. Yeah, the Priority Climate Action Plan is a program out of the U.S. EPA. So we were funded to develop both a PCAP, Priority Climate Action Plan, as well as a CCAP, a Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. The PCAP was due March 1st. We submitted it. An interesting program that was EPA had a formula grant for the planning portion, but then they have a competitive opportunity for proposals. So we actually, a month after we submitted the PCAP, submitted 2 very large proposals to see if we could seek implementation funding to carry out some of the projects in the plan. This spring and summer, we'll turn to the CCAP, the comprehensive plan, and that's due in 2025. Like most climate action plans, we focus on the most important sectors in our region, the built environment, so buildings, residential, commercial buildings, government facilities, power supply, and the energy mix of how we get our power, both for natural gas and electricity, and options to try to reduce emissions from that sector. And then, of course, transportation, a very big portion of our inventory here for this region. And then as part of that, we come up with our strategies and actions to put into the plan. So, traditional energy efficiency programs, renewable deployment programs, low emission vehicles, and then cross-cutting themes. So financing is a big one, coming up with the funding to implement these projects is a big challenge and opportunity. Yeah, so we're in workforce development, education, those types of things, and community outreach. So we've been real pleased that there was a ton of work. We got started around the November timeframe. I think we did probably 2 years worth of work in about 4 months. So it was pretty incredible. So thanks.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Bob or Jeff, Bob touched on this a little bit earlier. Can you talk a little bit about what specific projects were included in the application and what you all are looking for funding for?
Sure. So we had 2 different applications. One was, and I should say the competitive opportunity was made challenging by the fact that EPA said that they would your proposal would not be eligible if you propose a measure in the same location. So we had to be very careful about not having 2 different proposals in the same location have the same measure. And the challenge that came up was that in Maryland, they very much wanted to put in a proposal on the Building Energy Performance Standards, otherwise known as BEPS, which you don't have in Virginia, but it's in Maryland and DC. And they wanted to really focus on that large commercial buildings. And then we had a kind of a conflict there because the state of Maryland said, COG, you shall not put in an application that includes any Maryland counties that has anything on commercial buildings. So we said, okay, that's fine. But in Virginia, the number 1 priority, or one of the top priorities for sure, was commercial buildings, in part because Virginia is a Dillon Real Estate and, is a little bit behind on those types of things. So we did one proposal with focused on commercial buildings in Virginia only, but we pitched it as a 3 MSA coalition. So we did it in partnership with Richmond and Hampton Roads regions. So we were really pleased to get that kind of participation from the folks in Richmond and Hampton Roads, and it's entirely focused on commercial buildings. In the case of the COG region, so the tri-state Maryland, DC, Virginia, we focused on program that I really think has great potential, which is the Solarize Nova program, and Bob Lazzaro can talk about that. So the notion of, let's get in and do deep retrofits and then layer into that deployment of solar energy. We also did, had a lot of interest from our government members to procure electric vehicles. So not money for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, but actual purchase of replacement fleet vehicles that would be electric.
Awesome, thank you. So we talked about this being competitive funding. So what happens in the event that we don't get the money that we asked for? Are local governments sort of prepared to take up some of that mantle on their own? I know we, talked about, the supervisor was saying Fairfax County has a robust climate plan on their own, but how can we sort of be communicating with our local government representatives to ensure, say, if we don't get the funding we asked for, that we're still making progress and moving forward.
Is that one for me, Jordan, or was that for Jeff?
It's for
What do you think?
anyone. We can start with you, Supervisor.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, typically the way that we operate is, we decide our goals, we develop a plan to get there, and then we pull together any funding that's available, including federal funding. So, one example that isn't directly a clean energy grant, but I think really is on a historic Richmond Highway corridor where we are close to starting construction on what will be, for the time being at least, the largest transit project in the region with a BRT line there. We decided we were going to do it, right? We developed the scope, developed the budget, and then worked with our state and federal partners to identify funding. We received $22 million in federal transportation grants to purchase the right-of-way, which helps toward that project. So we decided that we wanted to electrify our bus fleet, both the county bus fleet and the schools bus fleet. We subsequently then were successful in getting a $16.5 million federal grant for 42 electric school buses. So I think we kind of look at it that way. We decide what our goals will be, what our plan is to get there, and then we apply, compete, advocate, beg, plead for any funding that's available, while also being on the lookout for other federal grant programs that maybe are available that we hadn't developed plans for, and look to work around it. So, I mean, the answer is we're going to do this work with or without the federal support. Obviously, we can significantly accelerate our progress if we're successful in competing for some of these federal funds.
I was just going to say, I've been around long enough when there was no federal money, but our local governments have been real leaders. And just one small story is the transition to LED streetlights. That's something, the conversation started here 4 or 5 years ago with Dominion Energy, our local government partners, about how can Dominion offer more styles, types of lights, etc. Fairfax County has like more than 50,000 streetlights in the county, and they're implementing it. They're using their own money. They're implementing it. I had just been back and forth with the director of environmental programs, John Morrill, in Fairfax, and he told me Fairfax County is saving 14 million kilowatt hours of electricity a year just with their LED streetlights. And we've done that across the region. I mean, Alexandria, Arlington, some of our smaller jurisdictions are served by our county governments, are moving towards a transition in LED streetlights, using their own money, getting that work done. So it's even small things like that with no federal or state money involved that has a real net benefit to the region as a whole.
Yeah, that's excellent. And you're right. The local governments have really had a unique opportunity to be real leaders in this space. And we're very grateful that there seems to be a widespread commitment to moving us forward with or without federal funding, which is amazing. So let's talk a little bit, Jeff mentioned that there are two sort of stages of this, right? The priority climate action plan for near-term goals and the comprehensive climate action plan for more long-term. As we sort of move into that second phase, do y'all have any updated like priorities? Is there going to be a second wave of community involvement? What is that sort of next stage of this process going to look like?
Yeah, so the next stage will involve a little bit more emphasis on community engagement, as you just mentioned. The EPA is really looking to us for that, so we'll have a consultant team support and coming up with an engagement plan, and so this summer into the fall, hoping to find opportunities to engage with various stakeholders across the region. So we'll be looking to organizations like this as well to see what you can do to help with that. Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things. I think the one area that we have not started to get into yet that will be a critical part of the next phase is currently the COG region. So not the larger MSA, but the COG footprint region has a 2050 goal of 80% reduction by 2050 below 2005 levels. And that goal was adopted way back in 2008 when COG adopted the climate change report for the National Capital Region. And our 2030 goal is 50% reduction by 2030. So the interesting challenge that will be before us in the next year to 18 months probably is the notion that EPA and the CCAP, we will need to demonstrate that the CCAP is putting us on a trajectory to net zero by 2050. And that is a conversation that has not yet started at the regional level. I know some of our local members have already had those kinds of conversations, and some of our members have goals that go beyond our current goals. But that's kind of be one of the more interesting challenges. Now, interestingly, from my perspective, I've been working on climate change since 1990, so 30-something years in working on climate change. And I look at our 2030 goal of a 50% reduction by 2030, and as you can count, we're not that far away. 5-6 years will go by quite quickly, and to get that kind of reduction is going to take a lot. Supervisor Walkinshaw mentioned the notion of acceleration. We need pedal to the metal. We have so much work to do just to meet the 50% by 2030 in the face of things like exponential growth in energy demand for things like data centers. So we not only have to address load growth, but we need to figure out how to decarbonize it really quickly, like the next 3, 4, 5 years. So interesting to then take your foot off the gas in the near term to start thinking about these longer term 2050 goals. So it's kind of an interesting rub, and we kind of have to do both. And we'll be, I'm still kind of decompressing from the incredible amount of work that went into getting the PCAP done and the proposal done. So kind of taking a couple weeks to not think about this has been helpful for me. But any second now, we have to get back engaged and start thinking about, what does this look like for the region? And, are we really able to get a coalition to kind of drive us towards that net zero by 2050 or even more than that, so.
Yeah. And this is something that I talked with Bob about just before we jumped on here, but I'd be interested to get all of y'all's opinion. You mentioned that moving into this next phase, we're really going to be leaning on community engagement. And this whole process of implementation of the Affordable Clean Energy Plan has raised a lot of questions for folks, and there's a lot of confusion around like what this whole process is and what money's available and where is it coming from. And so as we, enter this next stage of community involvement, what do you all want folks to know before they start engaging with you on the next part of this process? What do you think is most important for them to know?
I'll start, Jordan, and I think it's, such an important question. And one of the issues that keeps me up at night is thinking there are opportunities out there and ways to save money out there that not every one of my 130,000 constituents knows about or feels like they have enough information to take advantage of. So I'm really passionate about getting that information out. And, every once in a while, I bump into a constituent who maybe doesn't share my passion for addressing climate climate issues, or maybe even doesn't accept that they're important issues. And I always say to them, okay, I bet you still enjoy saving money. I bet you still want to find ways to save money. And usually they have to grudgingly admit yes. So one of the things that we did last year is we organized a climate action conference in my district in Burke. We had great presenters from kind of across the federal, state, and local spectrum. And it was for exactly this purpose, right? Not to talk about the science of climate change or any high-minded ideas, very tactical. Here are the programs that exist. Here's who's eligible, and here's how much money you can save and how you can access them. And I think and we're going to be doing that again this year in the fall. I can't plug it because we don't have the date yet, but it'll be this fall. And I think that's where we have to be, right? Because it is, anything having to do with taxes and tax credits, it's complicated. People's eyes glaze over, and we're all busy, and we move on to the next thing and maybe miss out on an opportunity to save money. So I think we have a great opportunity at the local government level to really be that honest broker of information, right? We're not trying to sell you anything. We're just giving you the information about the opportunities that are available to you. And I think that's kind of one of the most efficient ways we can use our resources at the local level. I can advocate in Richmond, in Washington, and I do for cleaner energy production, right, and phasing out of fossil fuels. But at the end of the day, those aren't my decisions. But what I can do very tangibly is give my constituents and folks in Fairfax County the information to take advantage of a program like Solarize Nova, or EV tax credits, or a tax credit to get rid of their old gas-powered water heater and install a hybrid heat pump water heater, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something where I've really tried to focus. And as a county government, we're going to be doing even more on that in the near future.
If I could just add, I mean, Supervisor Walkinshaw is a strong supporter of our work and obviously Fairfax County's, and is having trusted elected officials sharing just the information. Over my right shoulder that way is nbrcenergy.org, where we list all of the available local, state, federal, regional programs, from energy efficiency, solar, electric vehicles, other tax credits. And as the supervisor said, hey, do you like saving money? There are free programs today that are available to residents to take advantage of weatherization and energy efficiency. So anything like the league can do in sharing the website, letting people know that these are available, is invaluable to us and to the region as we look towards meeting a very steep challenge of these climate goals in the future. And so any little bit of information from trusted folks, our elected officials, our county governments, city, town governments do a great job in sharing it. The supervisor puts out an email blast on our Solarize program. All of a sudden we see the numbers spike, and over the last 10 years, it's been nearly 1,000 families have gone through to solarized it. So we're really excited about it, but there's a lot of information sharing that needs to be done.
Absolutely. Jeff, did you have anything else to add? Anything you feel like people should know heading into the next stage of this?
Well, one thing for sure, Solarize has been great. I call it the Tupperware parties for solar, and the getting the people together, neighbors together to understand, to help folks understand, how to go through the process has made a huge difference. And so the whole notion of solar co-ops, Solarize programs, and just getting the word out is really helpful. One of the things we've done at the regional level is we've set up a regional goal of 250,000 solar rooftops. Our original goal was, I think, 10,000, then it was 30,000. We're currently around 72,000. but we're hoping to see, 250,000 solar rooftops by 2030. And that, programs like Solarize Nova are, definitely one of the leading ways to kind of achieve that goal. So we're looking for lots of enthusiasm and interest in that area.
Yeah, thank you so much. One thing I want to touch on in the overview, we went over the fact that a lot of this, a lot of the focus of the Affordable Clean Energy Plan is on making sure that frontline communities and climate justice communities aren't left behind in this process. Can y'all talk a little bit about either from the regional planning level or even in the county level, how you have taken that into account and integrated that priority into your plans?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick that one off, Jordan. So in Fairfax County, everything we do is guided by our One Fairfax racial and social equity policy. And it's been really powerful, and I have to give our chairman, Jeff McKay, who at the time as a district supervisor kind of led the effort to establish this policy. But what it means is we look at every issue through that lens of racial and social equity. Even the most mundane sounding issue goes through that lens. So when we're looking at redesigning our bus routes, right? How much will it cost? Do we have the buses available? How many people will it move or not move? And also, what will the impacts be on low income or underserved communities? And in terms of our climate action planning, there's some very specific ways and programs that we've used that lens on. One is HomeWise, which is our program to encourage people to take in a low cost way, weatherize their homes and improve the energy efficiency of their homes with LED lights and all the other kinds of low cost things. We have kits that are free at our libraries that folks can check out and utilize to do that. And I mentioned our CCAP plan early on. One of those goals is to weatherize 100,000 homes by 2050, which is, that's a big number. And that's one of those goals where we are actually ahead of schedule. And we've done 38,000 homes, a lot of them in low-income communities. Another area, one of our goals is to increase our tree canopy across the county from, we're about 56% today. And our goal is to get to 60%, which doesn't sound like a big jump, but that's a lot of trees to get from 56% of 400 square miles to 60% of 400 square miles. But we have a sub goal as well that every census tract, and if you looked at census tracts, some of them are quite small. Every census tract will have at least 40% tree canopy. And that gets at a lot of lower income, predominantly immigrant communities, mostly inside the Beltway, but some outside the Beltway as well, quite frankly, that haven't historically had access to parks and open space. So we're working very hard on that 60% overall goal, but just as hard on that 40% everywhere in Fairfax County. So I was just out last week. We're partnering with a incredible nonprofit called Casey Trees to do tree plantings, especially at schools and other county government sites in those census tracts that have been largely bereft of tree canopy and tree coverage. So those are just two ways that we're applying our One Fairfax racial and social equity lens to our climate work.
I would just add that if we're able to get the carbon pollution reduction grant, our Solarize program would be geared towards families first who have been weatherized, and to have been weatherized, this would be on the lower end of the economic spectrum. So we hope to be able to do up to 1,000 homes if able, or other affordable housing projects. And we've been working with a group called LEAP and Community Housing Partners Energy Solutions for the last decade or so. And they provide energy efficiency and weatherization services as well. Many of them are income or age-based programs. And so we're confident with the Solarize program that we have a pretty good number of folks that would be eligible who are economically disadvantaged, no way could ever afford to put solar on their house, to be able to help them. So we look forward to being able to do that. And even if we don't get the carbon pollution reduction grant, things like weatherization, energy efficiency, as the supervisor talked about, are extremely important in helping people reduce their energy bill.
Yeah, and I put in the chat, we here at COG, you know, our front line is really more with our government members, and so we're a little less active kind of out in the community. But that kind of regional planning level, one of the things that our transportation planning department did was establish these the concept of equity emphasis areas. So very similar to the Justice 40 from the White House. But, you know, as we do our regional planning work, we try to keep in mind, you know, what can we do to direct some of the benefits of what we're trying to do into these communities. And we're fairly early on in that kind of initiative, and really looking to the CPRG engagement piece coming up to see what we can do more of in that regard. And as Bob mentioned, if we get funding for the Solarize program, the concept that he's looking at will really focus first at that kind of, you know, that frontline community that really needs that assistance.
Thank you. This is all really exciting developments. So I want to go ahead and start moving into the Q&A portion. I've got 2 questions in the Q&A box already. If you have additional ones, I encourage our attendees to drop more questions in the Q&A box. But for now, we'll go ahead and get started with, and I guess this is mostly a question for Jeff and Bob. As you all are looking at sort of the region as a whole, beyond Fairfax County, which, as we've already talked about, has served as a leader on these issues, what other localities do you feel like are doing a really good job of making sort of comprehensive climate action plans for their area and moving their locality forward?
Well, interesting that interesting timing. If you had asked this question about 8-10 years ago, I would have had a very different answer. But you know, one of the things that we did here at COG back in, God, it was about 2017 maybe, is we had a phone call from Montgomery County in Maryland, and they were looking for some assistance in developing a climate action plan. And they wanted to ride a contract that I had with a consultant firm, and unfortunately I couldn't, but it gave me the idea that our local members were ready to take action to develop climate plans. And so we did a procurement, we got expert consultant support. We now make that available to all of our COG members to develop either a government operations plan or a community-wide plan, or actually to support their implementation. And that program has taken off. So pretty much, I would say every COG member, for the most part in Northern Virginia, has taken action on climate planning, either using, you know, through COG or writing the contract or having their own procurement support. So Arlington, Fairfax, Alexandria, Loudoun, Prince William, all doing really great work on climate planning, and it's just remarkable to see. And some of these localities, as you've heard today, but you know, beyond this call, have moved past that planning stage, and they're actually now focused entirely on, you know, what can we do to implement the plan. So, you know, we've been really pleased to see that, because we had in our first regional climate plan back in, you know, 2010, 2012 timeframe, one of the first rows in the plan was we want 100% of COG member jurisdictions to develop greenhouse gas inventory and a climate action plan. And that did not happen overnight. It took almost 10 years really to get that moving. But at this point, pretty much all of the COG members on the Virginia side have developed local plans, which is just great to see.
Jordan, you're asking me to choose my favorite child, you know, and with 13 members, I would just echo Jeff's sentiments. I think everyone, number one, believes that climate change is real. They're working in their own individual ways to accomplish the tasks at hand. If you talked to me 10 years ago, I would find it hard to believe, but Loudoun County Public Schools has more schools with solar than any public school system in Northern Virginia. 13 or 14, and every school that they build, anything new they build comes with solar. And so they're a leader. Others are behind, but they're doing similar work. So I think it's really important. NVRC has been involved in this issue on community energy planning for more than 20 years. Two of our localities adopted them. One has been going full bore for the last 20 years to implement them. But a lot of folks have caught up and are doing great work.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Bob and Jeff covered it well. Everyone is on their journey. It's a little bit different journey and different places of the journey for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So our second question is really trying to get at the role that the state of Virginia has to play in advancing these regional goals that y'all have earmarked. What is that role, if any, that the state government can play? And I know somebody mentioned that Virginia is a Dillon Rule state earlier. What impact does that have on progressing through this process?
Yeah, I can speak to that, and I have a different vantage point now as I'm chairing both the environmental committee and the legislative committee, and there's so much intersection between our environmental goals and agenda and what we need from Richmond. And the Dillon Rule dynamic is significant in this area. I'll share one example. We have been working for many years and are now close to, we might have started construction or will be starting very soon construction on a solar facility. I think 3 megawatts solar facility at the Lorton landfill in southern Fairfax County. And our goal for that project is to take the energy we produce at the Lorton landfill and use it to power other county facilities and buildings in Fairfax County. The law in Virginia for many, many years did not allow for us to do that, right? If you generated solar on site, you had to use it on site. So we had to beg and plead and fight and get bills introduced and fail and eventually succeed after many years with LCV's support to get the solar freedom legislation passed in 2020, I think it was, which has allowed us to move forward on that project. Obviously, the economics wouldn't make sense. We don't need 3 megawatts of electricity at our landfill. We need it in other places in the county. So, but that shows how difficult the Dillon Rule can make some of these issues in terms of implementation. The other piece of it is just the state policies, even somewhat separate from the state local interaction, right? So the adherence to the Virginia Clean Economy Act and meeting the goals, or I shouldn't say goals, meeting the targets in the Virginia Clean Economy Act are necessary for us to meet our climate goals. Things like RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which unfortunately became kind of a partisan issue. In Fairfax County, those RGGI funds delivered $14 million of home improvements, mostly for low-income residents. So the money that was generated statewide from RGGI went right directly into communities, including communities in Fairfax County, to help meet our goals to offset energy costs for folks who have trouble affording their energy costs. And Virginia potentially not participating in a program like RGGI would set us back. So we need flexibility from the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we need them to stay committed to the goals and targets that they've laid out.
I mean, just to add, the Commonwealth has just received an award for Solar for All. So how that's implemented, no word yet on the rebate program for home energy efficiency. So it's not a tax credit, it's a direct rebate. Waiting on that kind of information. And, again, sticking to the goals of the Virginia Clean Economy Act. And we have been an early supporter of remaining in RGGI and continue to do so. It's extremely helpful. A house is eligible for weatherization, but there's holes in the roof, which you can't use weatherization money for. So the deferred maintenance program money that's been funded by RGGI has been extremely important to help families, throughout Virginia who otherwise would still have heat or rain coming into their house because of the condition of the home. So we have been, and Supervisor Walkinshaw voted for the resolution in support of the Solar for All program. And we're waiting to hear back from the Virginia Department of Energy on how those funds are going to be apportioned throughout the Commonwealth.
And one thing I just want to I want to add, because I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about this, but the Dominion's relatively new interconnection rules on mid-sized solar projects are proving to be a significant barrier for us in Fairfax County, and has slowed down and frankly ground to a halt some of our projects to install solar on schools and county government buildings. It's a highly technical issue, which I think will be decided hopefully relatively soon at the State Corporation Commission. But it's a good example of, a new policy that was discussed and debated at the General Assembly. They decided not to take action, but it is slowing down our progress. And to Jeff's point about, the tight timelines that we're under here to meet our interim goals and our long-term goals, when you have a year or two lost for some project progress on specific types of projects, that makes it a lot harder. Makes it a lot harder.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much. We're right here up at the end of the hour. I will do one last call for anyone who has a question, pressing questions for our speakers. But not seeing any. I want to thank the three of you so much for being here, for your hard work, continuing hard work, on making sure that Virginia has all the possible opportunities available to receive federal funding, and with or without that funding to make significant progress so that we meet our goals and our targets. So thank you all so much. We will surrender the rest of your day back to you. And for both our speakers and attendees, the recording of this will be made available to you shortly later this week. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.